Bram Stoker's Dracula is a book about a vampire named Dracula who wants to move to England. But Jonathan Harker, a man who works for a law firm, goes to Dracula's castle and finds out that Dracula is actually a vampire. Dracula then travels to England and starts to attack people. But a group of people, including a doctor and a professor, try to stop him. The video game based on the book is considered one of the 4 worst shooting games on Sega Genesis because it does not follow the story of the book very well. The game is confusing and difficult to play, with poor graphics and sound effects. The levels are repetitive and boring, and the controls are clunky and unresponsive. The game does not capture the excitement and suspense of the book, and it is not enjoyable to play. Overall, it is a bad adaptation of a classic novel and a poor video game. Shaq Fu is a fighting game that was released on Sega Genesis in 1994. The game features basketball superstar Shaquille O'Neal as the main character and takes place in a mystical world where he must fight a variety of enemies to save a young boy from an evil sorcerer. Shaq Fu is widely regarded as one of the worst games on Sega Genesis due to several major flaws. The graphics and sound are considered subpar for the time, with poorly designed characters and repetitive music. The gameplay mechanics are also clunky and difficult to master, making it frustrating for players to progress through the game's difficulty is unfairly high, often requiring players to repeat levels multiple times to progress. The lack of save points or continues adds to this frustration and makes it difficult to complete the game. Shaq Fu's poor graphics, sound, gameplay mechanics, and difficulty make it one of the worst shooting games on Sega Genesis. While it may hold nostalgic value for some fans of Shaquille O'Neal, it is not recommended for those looking for a quality gaming experience. Rambo 3 is a shooting game based on the famous movie series. The game follows John Rambo as he goes on a mission to rescue his friend, Colonel Troutman, who has been captured by the Soviet Army in Afghanistan. The game has very poor graphics and the controls are difficult to use. The game also lacks variety in enemies and environments, making it very repetitive and quickly boring. Additionally, the difficulty level is very high, making it frustrating for players to progress through the game. The game also lacks a save feature, which means that players have to start from the beginning every time they lose all their lives. Overall, Rambo 3 is considered one of the 4 worst shooting games on Sega Genesis because of its poor graphics, difficult controls, lack of variety, Terminator 2 level, Judgment Day is a movie-based shooting game for the Sega Genesis console. In the game, you play as the T-800 robot, also known as the Terminator, who must protect John Connor from a more advanced and dangerous Terminator. The gameplay is very basic and repetitive, with little variation in the enemies, weapons, and levels. The graphics are outdated even for the time it was released, and the control is clunky and frustrating. The game also suffers from a lack of challenge and overall excitement, making it a forgettable experience. Overall, Terminator 2: Judgment Day is one of the 4 worst shooting games on the Sega Genesis due to its poor gameplay, graphics, and lack of innovation or excitement.